Welcome to Fire Chat here at Accelerace. Today we have a really special guest, Jens from Gradualand, one of the companies participating in Accelerace, also invested in Gradualand. And Jens today qualifies as a real serial entrepreneur because he's finished in Gradualand, but now started his second company, I believe. But maybe Jens, you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about Gradualand, but of course a little bit more on your new venture.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We started Gradualand 5 years ago, basically when I was studying still, and with the vision of connecting employers and young students in order for them to find each other, both on a national scale and also internationally. And grew that business, so we're now 30 people and have a quite dominant market position here in Europe. And we're at a point now, or was at a point half a year ago, where I felt that it was more an operational task of growing this business than innovation, to be honest. And as a result of that, I had some thoughts into what could I do with the knowledge I had from Gradualand, where could I make the largest impact. That actually led to the foundation of Untitled, which is basically started with the vision of helping recruiters learn from data. Because we saw that the biggest problem being an advertiser, where the recruiters bought our advertising product, was actually their ability to evaluate us as an advertising channel. And that was done most of the times by asking people, or asking the application, or the people applying for the jobs, where they came from, instead of actually tracking the entire funnel down to a hire.
Sure.
So that is Untitled. We're enabling companies and recruiters to measure the entire funnel from the first time someone sees your job ad to they get hired into a company.
Sure. So they can basically start measuring where the good candidates coming from, what is kind of the good channels to get the right young employees and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Okay, fantastic.
Exactly.
Okay, and that is started this year.
Started this year, like a head start last year with a lot of customer feedback and a lot of digging into the market and a lot of desktop research also. Yeah. And then we basically started off with 3 big employers like Nordea, TDC, Dang Energy, big telco, big bank, big utilities company, and had them as our initial test customers. So basically laid out the vision of this, saying we want to help you make smarter, data-driven decisions. Do you want to participate? Sure. The good thing is that we knew these customers from beforehand, so it was kind of an easy sell to get them on board to start off with. And then the whole idea was to, if we're able to make a product in 3 months that they would like to pay for, then we start a new company. Yeah. And luckily we were able to do so, and now we're starting to roll it out to a lot of other customers and starting to see what kind of new things we can build into the product. So still really early days, but like a good start, I would say, to this new thing.
Sure. And the idea of today was to actually have a discussion around that. So basically say, well, the whole idea about the lean startup methodology and at least our thinking at Accelerace around how do you build a startup is basically that a startup is a long series of experiments where you try to kind of formulate your assumption around your company, you try to test them, you try to figure out what is the pattern in those data, and then you try to build concepts on that, or you figure out your assumptions was basically wrong. And kind of from my perspective, of course, that sounds really intuitive, but one of the at least kind of issues that we are facing working with startup is, well, how do you design the real right experiments? And in my mind, of course, it's a function of both you asking the right questions. So what is it that you want to basically figure out? But also a function on how do you design the experiments. I myself have a background in math and science, and I know when we're doing kind of empirical work in physics, then you're really keen on figuring out, well, how do you make your assumptions really precise, and how do you get, when you do your empirical experiment, how do you get rid of all the noise that is usually in there? So can you tell us a little bit about, well, how have you gone through this process? Maybe focusing on your kind of your Untitled, your new venture. So how did you do the process of building your assumption? But more, how how do you do those experiments and make sure that you actually get the right answers?
Yeah, I think to start off with, there is a big difference between doing lean startup in a B2C online-driven model and a B2B enterprise model.
Sure.
Whereas the B2C one, where you have most of the time you'll have a lot of data, it's more like a quantitative test. So it's more binary, I would say. And in the early phases of both models, it's more qualitative data, at least from my perspective, we're looking for. In our perspective on the Untamed part, it's enterprises, so big employers. And the way we build it is actually kind of deductive, so like a pyramid where you have the initial vision, the value proposition you're bringing to market.
Sure.
And then we started highlighting like 3 things that we would like to make a difference for in those people who are buying our product. And that was regard to the quality of the hires and the applications that they're getting.
Yeah.
It is the speed of where they're getting the applications and where they how fast they're able to hire people. And then it's the cost. So the cost per app, like for a job application and for hire. So that's our value tree, so to say. And from there on, we started looking at what kind of challenges do we see in the market as it is now for being able to measure this. And that was mostly in regards to IT challenges. So basically big headaches for our CTO. So we made like 2 different kind of like hypothesis trees,
Sure.
Technical wise and business wise.
Yeah.
So we said if we're able to solve, for instance, one of the first assumptions was actually if we're able to get a Java script placed on Nordea.com or dongenergy.com or TDC, we would be able to do so. Like getting a third-party script placed on one of the biggest employers in Denmark we were told was impossible. You're not able to do it. But that was actually the first step. We were really focused on telling them the entire value of having this small script integrated. It took us quite a long time, but as soon as we had the first customer, we were able to say, these guys are doing it. We've been through the entire IT compliance all the way. It's not dangerous, like really sketching out all the benefits and also saying out loud the obstacles that might be. And as soon as we had that on the first one, we were able to roll that out.
Sure.
So that was both, it was a technical hypothesis that we are going to use this JavaScript, and then it's more of a business customer-oriented one. Can we get it placed on this? And that was a check mark. And then the next one was, are we able to take all this data we have here? So it's actually a third-party data.
Yeah.
We don't own the data, nor does the company. It's actually on behalf of the ones visiting the page. Are we able to take this data, match it together with quite confidential HR data in the recruitment systems?
Yeah.
So that meant we had to go to some recruitment like software vendors and say, on behalf of these clients, we would like to access this data. We are going to use it for XYZ, and we got some closed doors to start off with. But again, the first one is always the one unlocking things.
Yeah.
Along the way, we've learned a lot, and it's been like this journey because we started off focusing a lot on doing API integrations and doing things the right way. And at some point, you just find out that in order to get something online, in order to prove some of these hypotheses, you need to do some work that is not the linear road. So
exactly.
It means pulling out data in Excel and doing all the work behind the screen so the customers just get the end results. So back to your question, long answer, but 2 different kind of like hypothesis trees where they actually correlate.
Yeah.
So the one is dependent on the other.
Yeah.
And that is still the way that we're building out customer relationships now, but also the product. We try to only have 3 to 5 at a time, because otherwise I get too confused. And,
sure. So you're trying to say, well, when we are doing the experiments, the one thing that we try to focus on our assumptions, say, well, instead of testing 5, that gives a lot of noise, because basically you don't know, is it the reaction to the 1 or the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th? So you try to, first of all, narrow that down and say, well, the first test was basically the technical test.
Yeah.
And the idea was, if that doesn't work, then we are in for troubles anyway. And then the next was kind of the more commercial test? Can we actually get the data? And are they providing value to you? Have you in that process kind of you said that you had kind of three value drivers, the cost part, the speed part, and getting the right applications and stuff like that. Have you through your process changed those, or are they still kind of the core of what you're doing, or are one of them getting more and more important compared to the others?
I would say we still maintain these, but definitely the one that I see is most important is the quality part.
Okay.
Because that is what they've been furthest from being able to measure themselves. That is basically the whole premises of a recruiter, is being able to bring in someone to your company that provides value in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years.
Exactly.
So the quality is everything. And the cost is more of a statical variable, quite easy to measure. The speed is more an operationally focused one. The entire value proposition of the recruitment department is quality.
Exactly.
So that I would say is the most important one.
Exactly.
Also the most difficult one.
Exactly. And how do you in those talks with your customer figure out, well, I would imagine that the quality from the perspective of a Nordea is a little bit different from the perspective of one of your other customers. So how did you get into really deep understanding of what is quality in the perspective of your different customers?
It's actually it's again going back to for instance, if I wanted to investigate quality, we actually just did it yesterday with a couple of customers. I would ask, how do you determine success in your company for a new hire?
Sure.
And the funny thing is, it is really different, as you say. And the not so funny thing is that a lot of them actually have anti-KPIs on the ones. So they don't measure the quality of a candidate being employed. They measure the risk of him leaving.
Okay.
It's quite funny.
Exactly.
So they would look at churn rate, for instance, employee churn rate. That is one of the core measurements. But the reason why they measure churn rate, or they use churn rate, is because they lack the data to actually measure the correlation between, for instance, a guy with a Master of Science in Finance who speaks 3 languages, come from the northern part of Copenhagen. That's their input data. We're able to give them that. They actually have the other data that they're able to match together. So that could be his performance reviews. It could be his ranking entirely in the company.
Sure.
It could be his salary. That is also variables. They're just not able to match together these two and make it correlate, as you know from physics and math and stat. But that's basically what we're trying to do. Whereas it's way easier for them just to look at how often do they quit actually.
Sure.
Whereas I wouldn't say that's not a leading indicator to performance. That's a leading indicator to you have something wrong with your company, but it doesn't make you perform.
Exactly. But how do you figure out then and say, well, of course I understand in the long run, but basically you can only test this correlation in a little bit of a longer run. So basically on the one hand you have to need to have a rather big proportion of potential hires. So you have to have a lot of jobs that you that you hire through your platform on the one hand, and then in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, then you can start measuring the correlations, right?
Exactly.
And of course you can claim you have the correlation, but basically you don't know. So how do have you thought about how you build kind of really early indicators on saying, well, are we actually providing that value as part of our service? So the customers can start to see, well, if this is right, then probably at least the probability of the long-term correlation is higher.
And you're actually hitting spot on what we're doing at the moment with some of the customers. And early indicators for success is that we're able to see, by using Untamed, every recruiter rate the application that they're getting in.
Sure.
So we're able to see, it's on a 1, 2, 3 scale. 3 is the best, 1 is the lowest. Mm-hmm. We're able to see that in the data, if they use the right sourcing metrics and they use the right channels, they actually get higher quality of applications. Okay. And that's an indicator of them having to go through few applications for hire. And then the next one is actually the churn rate. So we look at the first 3 months you're employed in a company. What are the chances of you leaving? So that's like the kind of quality, but it shows some sort of value. So our assumption would be by sourcing candidates from the right sources, but also the right neighborhoods. For instance, we saw at a big Danish telco, getting people to work for you when you have an office in the southern part of Copenhagen, and if you're from the northern part of Copenhagen, you have to go through the cities. So their churn rates on employees from the northern part of Copenhagen was 3 to I think 4 times the ones from where people came from, either east or south of Copenhagen. So that's quite of a correlation. But that's some of the things we're testing at the moment, and
so you are also in the process actually figuring out other correlations that I wouldn't expect that geography was actually part of the correlation with the churn rate, but you're also kind of discovering new types of correlations that could benefit the company, of course. Exactly.
And it's like when you look at data, you have to go in and have some sort of clue what you're looking for, but often you find some other correlations as well. And that was actually something we didn't look for. It was because we saw that a lot of the campaigns they were doing weren't working in the northern part of Copenhagen. And then we started looking, why aren't it working?
Okay.
That's basically it.
Then the second part that you're looking for in terms of a startup is, of course, when is our model and our feedback from our customers, when are we getting to a little bit of repeatability? So basically when we tell the same story, we get almost the same results. So I don't know how far you've gone either with Untitled or with Graduland. So what are the things that you're looking for in that repeatability when you are talking to customers?
I think I'm looking for like the key value drivers of them making the decision to purchase Untitled. And it again goes back to like the triangle about the speed, the quality, and the cost. And some companies will be far more focused on costs. That is typically the ones that are not faring so well. They will be really cost oriented. That could be Carlsberg, for instance. Whereas Novo Nordisk will be way more quality oriented and speed oriented. So they have different hot buttons and different from company to company, but they often lie within the same triangle of this. And then as soon as you start taking the product into new verticals, you'll get new things that you need to test off in order for this. We'll stay in this quite a long time because there's a lot of things still to do, but it often lies within the triangle, I'd say.
And how do you in your company, because of course talking to customers and again using the startup methodology and the whole thinking around it is, of course, you need to talk to a lot of customers and stuff like that. But how do you avoid getting a little bit cheated? So how do you avoid that well, I talked to this customer and he said this, and I talked to the next and he basically said something different and stuff like that. So how do you make sure that the different inputs that you get and probably to some extent are also different in their content, how do you avoid that you're not just being pulled apart?
I think
trying to serve
but I think like if I were to do this 5 or 6 years ago, I would have been pulled apart. But now we're really focused on trying to speak with the decision maker, and the sooner the better to start about talking about money and actually then paying for this, because then they're getting goddamn serious. So we actually, like we said to start off with when we did the initial test, you're going to get a test version for 3 months, and then our entire goal is for you to purchase this. If you don't purchase this, then we have failed. And if they know this, then they will give you way more concrete feedback. At least that's my experience. Because if people are just giving you feedback for the sake of having coffee and enjoying themselves, then they will be like we call them in Ninas, like no influence, no authority. So they will say whatever you like, and you'll get really, sorry for my French, crappy feedback, and you'll go back all confused. Whereas if you get like a head of HR technology, a head of HR, and you say, we're gonna help you with this, we're like gonna work hard for it, we're gonna do this in 3 months, and at the end of the day, we'd like you to pay for something. And if you have your desktop research done properly, like I would say doing your research from home means a lot, especially when you go to big enterprises, because if you just come out with a blank sheet and ask from A to C, then you are being torn apart. So doing good desktop research, having assumptions about the KPIs, I would say, not to brag, but we know the industry. We've hit, I think, 80% of the KPIs that we suggested might be leading indicators, they confirmed.
Sure.
And then they came with 20% that we didn't know of. But that was due to a lot of research and, of course, due to some knowledge as well.
Of course.
So I think still desktop research should be combined with the lean startup methodology.
Of course.
I perhaps see a tendency to disregard desktop research a bit to some extent, which I think is perhaps a bit wrong time to time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because it kind of, in my mind, it's you need a lot of data sources, and one source is of course talking to your customers, really important. But there are also other data sources that you need to take into account, and discarding kind of data sources just because they are desktop research, probably a little bit of a stupid idea. At least this is not the way you do research. Then you basically read through all the material done before, and then you formulate your assumptions based on that. Could you tell us a little bit about when you look back at your start in Graduate Land, and now you're a second startup and a lot more experienced? Can you see any difference in the way that you are working with your second startup compared to when you founded Graduate Land?
Yeah,
kind of some of the key issues.
I would say I don't think we were just firing away. We were hammering away when we started off Graduate. We were running in 20 different directions. And looking back, I would say if I were to do the same thing Graduate Land wise, me now, we could have done it in, I don't know, a third of the time. Because we've been way more focused. So I say the second time you are way more focused, but you're way better at saying yes and no to things. And you know where to put in your efforts.
Exactly.
And then I feel that the 5-6 years has been an education.
Yeah, of course.
And
sure.
money and time well spent. Because things are just going more rapidly now.
Exactly.
Also due to network and of course connections and stuff, but also due to the fact that you've tried things and you got the framework under your skin.
Exactly.
So yeah, really different, I would say.
Exactly. I think that was one interesting thing that you said about the kind of going into a meeting with customers and say, well, we basically want you to be in a position where you pay us money. And in my mind, that is kind of a little bit the level of commitment. So there's probably a correlation between the quality of input that you get from customer and their commitment to the case. And therefore, in some of my thinking has been that say, well, it is really good for startups to talk to customers, but you should value your input compared to the commitment that they are giving. So basically, if they just have one meeting with you, the value of the input maybe not so good, because then they're basically shooting for their hip. Can be of some value, but if they are spending the next meeting, then the value is probably a little bit higher. And if they are starting committing real resources in terms of money and time and stuff like that, then the feedback that you get is actually is a lot better, because now you are in real life testing of what you're doing. Now you're not kind of just assumption testing, but you're in real life testing at that point.
Yeah, I think you are totally. I think there's one-to-one almost.
Exactly.
Almost causality, but I think deep correlation. And I think one of the important parameters when at least doing it in the B2B space, where I have the most experience, is that a lot of people, like, basically it's a sale again. It's a sale when you want to do testing with a big customer, and because you have to sell them in that you are not going to waste their time.
Exactly.
You're going to provide them with value. And everyone wants to be valuable inside a company. So they have to feel that the project they're bringing in is something that will make them look awesome. And I think if you're able to do that, if you're able to say, for instance, the ones who are brought in on tape are the ones who are gonna be the sole force inside the company to take this recruitment department to data. And it's a big trend in the entire industry. In the entire world, everyone speaks about data, and you want to be the guy who brings in big data to HR. You want to be that guy because everybody asks for it. So if you're able to come with a value proposition and make them your own ambassador inside the company, then they would die to give you good feedback because their reputation actually depends on the good product that they're bringing in.
Sure.
And that's of course bigger companies, but there's a lot of politics in that as well. But so far I'm deeply impressed by the feedback you're getting when you have foot in the door.
Exactly. Could you tell me a little bit about what are you thinking about, say, well, in that process, and maybe especially when you are in a B2B market, what is how do you spend your resources on basically saying, well, we hunt new customers as part of this, and we try to kind of deepen our relationship with our existing customers? And the reason why I ask that is, say, well, when we are also investing in companies and stuff like that, should we measure more in the growth of new customers, especially within the B2B? Of course, at some point we should, but is it basically a better indicator that you are deepening the relationship with some customers?
Good question. I'm actually having those thoughts at the moment. So the first guy we're employing now is actually a customer success guy, because I love getting customers in the door. I also love serving them, but I have a deeper love for getting them in. So he's going to be focused on this triangle again, proving that value to the initial customers, and keep on improving that. So really integrating like the Untamed platform inside the organization. So I think once you're at that step where you have some sort of repeatability in your customer success after you landed a customer, and you can replicate that, then it's about turning on for the new business.
Sure.
But in order to have enough data customer-wise to be able to do the success, you have to have new business, of course. So I guess it's like a two-step way of doing things. I would say that the most dangerous things would be that if you haven't proved your value proposition the entire way with customers, and you start landing and onboarding a lot of new customers, then you're going to fail with these ones because they don't see value in your product. And then ultimately you're also going to fail with these ones because you haven't found the value. So like the most important thing I would say is still to find this small piece of value inside the customers you already have, and at the same time, of course, onboarding new customers. And as you get smarter, you're able to revise the way you do things. But it can be quite a gamble to just put on the throttle and just randomly new customers without really knowing what their hot buttons are.
So basically, you should be measuring a little bit on both, kind of how do you deepen your relationship, and are they not churning? Of course, you should be measuring on that, but try to be a little bit deeper in the beginning, because that's maybe a better sign of real value. So if they use you again and again and again, and more and more and more, compared to bringing new customers, maybe you're just testing your 20% value instead of your 80% value.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the most important things for like an early hire, sales-wise in a B2B company, is he is just as much a sales guy as he's a product guy.
Exactly.
And he has to be totally honest about the value and the feedback that he's getting back to the customers. So you really have to incentivize him to bring feedback back to the company. Because if he's incentivized in other ways, then he's never going to tell you the real feedback of the customers, and then you're going to flunk. So there's a lot of incentives and a lot of things you have to align, because if you lose out on that, then all the new customers you're bringing in will at some point also churn you. So that's a funny paradigm about the two.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. So I think we have to wrap up. Thank you, Jens. It's been a pleasure having you on board and hearing stories from now 2 startups. Hopefully you will also do a 3rd and 4th and all that stuff.
We'll see.
We'll see, depending on how things are panning out with your present ventures. But thank you very much. It's been really inspiring, and so good luck with your new story.
Thank you.